I can't understand the actions of my master plan. Can a nigga revel in the thoughts of a day? I can't understand the actions of my master plan. Can a nigga revel in the thoughts of a day?
Let it just be, innit? Still shitting on niggas. Still shitting on them. Yes, Vibe by Water TV. So listen, it's been a minute, but we're back for we're gonna do a video review of the new Quavo and Takeoff project album, whatever you might want to call it, mixtape. Really built for infinity links. So yes, listen, this is Quavo and Takeoff's first album, let's say, under their new name, Quavo and Takeoff. Obviously, we know this is Quavo and Takeoff of the Migos. Reason being that it's called Quavo and Takeoff, because obviously there's a member missing, there's no Offset. Obviously there's been a lot of conversation, let's say, of the reasons for why we haven't got a new Migos tape, or this isn't a Migos project, or Offset is nowhere to be seen. Few things that are going on. Of course, there's some label issues between Offset and QC. I believe obviously there's some money disputes. I don't know the full ins and outs, but of course there was some Twitter conversations going on between P of QC, who's obviously the head of the label, and Offset. Offset claiming that, you know, he had bought himself out of his contract, and that how I believe he wanted to release some of his own music, possibly away from the label, and that he had bought himself out of the contract. But then P is still claiming that, in fact, I guess he didn't buy himself out of the contract, and that he still has obligation to Offset's material in the future. So I believe that's created some tension within the group and within the label, because Offset wants to go off and do his own thing as a solo artist, probably, and still be in the Migos. But of course the Migos itself is signed to the label QC. So that's created some tension and that's created some issues. As I say, I don't know the full workings around that. And it sounds like, obviously, you know, Quavo and Takeoff are still kind of wanting to continue on with QC, and they have a good rapport and they have a good relationship. And I guess in terms of kind of the monetary aspect, they're happy to continue as they were. But Offset, I believe, probably is looking at the business and he's looking at the numbers and he's looking at the working outs, and it wasn't quite making sense to him. And it makes sense because, you know, Offset's got a family, you know what I mean? He's with Cardi B. His thing is a lot more precarious, if I can say that, in terms of kind of the people he has to look out for. We know, obviously, Quavo, I don't believe, is with anyone at the moment. He doesn't have any children. Same for Takeoff. Whereas, you know, Offset, I believe, has got 4 kids, maybe 5 kids. He's married. So his situation, he's got a lot more responsibilities. So it would make somewhat sense as to how it's kind of transpired. But yeah, with that being said, this is not a Migos tape. This is Quavo and Takeoff. Now, Quavo and Takeoff actually went on the radio recently, and have been claiming that, you know, like outside of the politics of the label and the money issues between QC and Offset, there's some behind the scene things happening between the group themselves. And, you know, Quavo mentioned that, you know, the group stands on real deal loyalty, and how he was kind of alluding to the fact that, you know, outside of the business, Offset's not been all the way loyal. Now, there's a lyric on this project, on, I believe, the tune Messy, where, you know, he mentions, you know, he speaks Quavo speaks on his situation with Sweetie, and obviously he doesn't call her out by name, but he says, you know, something, Carisha, please, and basically something along the lines of how the lady in question, Sweetie, did a thing with one of her guys. So it's interesting because now when Quavo had now done this interview just before this project release, and then people heard the lyric, people have put 2 and 2 together, and they believe, although there was even previously rumours that Offset and Sweetie may have done a little something, you know what I mean, after Sweetie and Quavo had broken up. So if that's the case, then it's a sticky one still. Me personally, knowing the relationship of, you know, Offset and Quavo, them being close friends going back many, many years, and them all being like a family, I find it slightly far-fetched. I don't believe that lyric is about Offset per se. It's possible, but I don't believe it's about Offset. If anything, I think it's probably more closer to being a situation with Lil Baby and Saweetie, because you know there was the picture that released possibly earlier this year, might even have been towards the back of last year, of, you know, Saweetie sitting on Lil Baby's lap. So I believe it could be possibly, you know, possibly more likely to be that situation, or it could just be a completely different situation that matches up with none of that. But at the same time, I do think it's interesting that Quavo has come out and said, you know, we speak on real deal loyalty. And obviously he was talking about Offset in that scenario. However, one thing I would say again is, me personally, I don't believe that Offset would have done that with Saweetie. I don't believe that to be the situation. But I don't know much about the gossip side of all of this. I don't really give a damn. But through the grapevine, these are the things that I've heard. So I don't believe that. But one thing I would say again, although Quavo said that, I don't quite believe him either. Because listening to this project, there's a whole lot of talk about, you know, QC, we put QC on, we are QC, where the epitome of QC. You know, if there wasn't no QC, then there wouldn't be no Quavo. If there was no Quavo, there wouldn't be no QC. A lot of that talk. So it sounds like, and that's on several like tracks. It's not just one song where you're hearing these guys talk about QC and what QC has done for them and what they've done for the label QC. So I find it interesting that, you know, you're finding that type of talk and that type of rhetoric on many of the tracks, which kind of, I feel like, I'm not gonna say, you know, that P or Coach K kind of told them to put it in the music, but I feel like maybe they felt obligated to put a lot more of those type of lyrics in the music as a way for them to demonstrate their loyalty and for them to show kind of which side of the line that they kind of stand on. So that's what makes me think that maybe it is more of the business side of what's created the discrepancy amongst the members, as opposed to, you know, some bedroom secrets, let's say. You know what I mean? So you never know. Obviously, it could be all of the above. It could be neither. We don't know. But that's just kind of how I've personally taken to it. I don't believe that Offset would have done the dirty like that. I believe he's smarter than that. And I believe, although obviously he's got a track record, you know what I mean? He's got a track record. I just don't believe he would do that to his brothers and that. But, you know, you never know. But, yeah, man. Getting into the album, Only Built for Infinity Links. Now that title, that's a special type of title. You've got to be really ready to stand on that if you're going to come with that, because obviously that's a tip of the hat to Raekwon and Ghostface, Wu-Tang, off of that Only Built for Cuban Links, one of the best rap albums to ever come out, in my opinion. You know what I mean? So it's a bold choice. I can definitely see why they've chosen that title, and I believe Takeoff said that he wanted to, you know, to show some homage to some of the greats, and obviously as a duo that they are now, obviously going back to back, and in the same way Raekwon and Ghostface in the past kind of went back to back and are kind of a duo where, you know, when you hear Raekwon, Ghostface is likely to be in the background somewhere. When you hear Ghostface, likely you're going to hear Raekwon somewhere. You know what I mean? They doubled up on Cuban Links 1, they did Cuban Links 2, you know what I mean? There was a lot of them doubling up on Wu-Tang Forever. Obviously 36 Chambers as well. You know what I mean? Iron Man, they doubled up on that as well. So, fucking even, what's the Bulletproof Wallets, you know what I mean? So, big shoes to kind of step into if you're going to use that type of title. And obviously the material is very different, as you would expect, these being a southern act, and obviously, you know, Raekwon and Ghostface being out in New York. But, you know, I'm not mad at the title. I do feel like it's a bit bold, but I'm not mad at it. And obviously they're trying to say Only Built for Infinity Links, that the bond of Quavo and Takeoff is not to be messed with, you know what I mean? That's something that's that's in stone, that's infinity, you know what I mean? That's family ties. So I feel that, you know what I mean? And obviously on the first track, there's a little narration that Quavo does. Infinity Links is one of the strongest in the world. You know what I mean? So they're trying to show that their thing is not something that's going to be, there's nothing that's going to come between Quavo and Takeoff, basically, that their thing is solidified in blood, you know what I mean? So I hear that. Obviously we've heard some of the tracks that had kind of released early off of this album. Hotel Lobby, we've heard Us versus Them, they dropped as well, and then the Big Star and the Birdman tune as well. So they're things that kind of had dropped prior to the project coming out. But all in all, if I'm going to talk about it, it's Migos without Offset. They're still doing the same flows, you know what I mean? The same type of material, same content, same style beats. A lot of familiar guests in terms of, you know, Gucci Mane shows up on this, Young Thug shows up on this, Gunna's on this as well. So a lot of familiar collaborations. In terms of on the production side, we're hearing a lot from DJ Darrell. One thing I'll say about him, his beats are, you know what I mean, from where he came from, his beats have definitely come a long way and he's arrived. Murder Beats is on it, Mustard's on this as well. Buddha Bless, I believe, is on this as well. So we're hearing a lot of the producers and the collaborators that they've worked with in the past. I believe they mentioned that, you know, they went to the vault, and a lot of these tracks are things that they've kind of had sitting for a while, that they've just kind of done over the years, and then they've also recorded a lot of new material. Standout tracks for me on this definitely is Hotel Lobby, which is just a fucking hit. Like, damn, come on man, you can't fuck with that. Hotel Lobby is a hit. Not Out, I enjoy that as well. That's a good song. Chocolate, which actually is the track that does feature Young Thug and Gunna. It's good to hear them. It's good to hear Young Thug just rapping, like, you know what I mean? We know Young Thug as being someone who's able to use his voice in a certain way to be almost like an instrument, and he has so many different styles and different flows and different cadences and different ways that he attacks music. But it's good to just hear him, and he's just rapping, just flat out. He's just, you know what I mean, he's doing his thing. They go back to back. Obviously, Quavo and Takeoff go back to back on the first verse. Then Young Thug comes in, and then Gunna follows suit as well. So it's nice to kind of just hear them just rapping, you know. There's no gimmicks, it's just a good song. Young Thug does his thing, most definite, and Gunna does his thing as well. And it's just good to hear them. Obviously, we know the boys are locked down at the moment, free the guys, but it's kind of good to hear them just, you know, on new music. 230 is an interesting one, based around Percocet. Percocet when I walk in this bitch, ain't Percocet when I like that tune, man. It's kind of a bit of a ignorant, a bit of an obnoxious one, but at the same time I fuck with that. It kind of reminds me in a sense of the way they're playing with the auto-tune of on Culture 2. Too Much Jewelry, which actually ended up being my favourite track on Culture 2. And obviously they was talking about jewelry. Too much jewelry. I just want to pull half a ticket for my jewelry. So very similar to that, in the sense of kind of the way they're playing with the auto tune. But you know, I enjoyed that. That's a good track. The way the strings and the violin coming on that is nice as well. That's a proper tune. I can't lie. Look at This. I really enjoy that. Similarly, the way the violins and the keys hit on that is nice, and then the drum pattern is. Look at this, hey, and look at this. Got 2 on the neck, 3 on the wrist, 2 on the, and that guy cool. Yeah, I like that. I like that. They're flying on that. Just an upbeat one. It's fun, and they're just doing what they do. Really nice beat, and Quavo and Takeoff are dancing on the beat real smoothly. So I fuck with that. Yeah, integration. I think is probably one you just have to hear. I don't know how good my explanation is of that. So if you can try and look out for integration if you haven't heard of that, or if you haven't heard it so far. But yeah, pretty much those were my standout tracks. There was a few others, you know, Hell There and Tools were okay. But I would definitely say standout tracks were, let's have a go here. Hotel Lobby, Chocolate, Not Out, 230, Look at This. That middle section, kind of that run between, let's say, track 7 and track 15, that's when I reckon it picked up and kind of hit its heights. Integration, Nothing Changed, Messy as well. So yeah, man, all in all, it still feels like very much a Migos project. And one thing I'd say, obviously, when I first started listening to the Migos all them years back, you know, Offset was in jail. There was no Offset. It was Takeoff and Quavo. It was only till, you know, when Bad and Bougie and kind of, you know, Young Rich Nation came out where Offset was back on the scene and stuff. And obviously, he helped them blow with Bad and Bougie, and then he was a mainstay and etc. etc. But Quavo and Takeoff is Migos to me. Like from when I was listening, this was what it was. These two were the ones holding it down. Still feels like Migos. personally, for me, as much as I do enjoy Offset, I didn't feel like something was missing in terms of like Offset needs to be there to hold something down. Because to be honest, like they are different, and obviously you hear the differences between the three members, but at the same time they do offer a lot of the same things. Where, you know, Offset might rap in a certain type of way that you really enjoy, but Takeoff is not too far off of that. Or maybe Takeoff might even be just ahead of that in terms of rapping anyway. So you don't feel like you're missing a certain element of rap or style of rap that Offset might bring, because you're going to get it in Takeoff. Or, you know, just maybe like a silly metaphor, or the singing, or the melodies, or the cadence of kind of, you know, like a slower song, for example, that Offset might be able to do. You're not missing that, because Quavo's going to give you that. And Quavo's going to give it in his way, and it's authentic the same way, and it still feels like Migos. So, for me personally, I didn't feel like I was really missing too much without there being Offset, to be honest. The beats were still what you would expect. The flows is still what you would expect. The content is still what you would expect. The features still came through as you would expect. It's a Migos project. It's a Migos album, just without Offset. I don't know how that bears. I don't know if that spells something quite worrying for Offset, because then that kind of does signify that, not that he's redundant, but like if he's not there, things still move, things still tick, the music's still good in my opinion. So it's interesting. Obviously as time goes on, we're going to see, and I would imagine this is probably going to play itself out, and Offset's going to come back to the group eventually, maybe when they work out a business. But at the moment they're saying that, you know, Quavo and Takeoff are the duo. Migos does still exist, and when they're ready to form again as a trio, then I'm sure they will. But yeah, man, for the minute, only built for infinity links. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention as well is bars into captions. It's funny because I was speaking to one of my dear friends, and we was talking about how, you know, a lot of the times, like, music nowadays is actually being almost created for like the TikTok era, and created for Instagram captions. It's like the feeling in the music is not there. People are just making songs to have a catchy line or a catchy hook that someone can then take and place as their picture, as their caption for one of their pictures on fucking Instagram. And that's kind of shit, because it takes away from the music, I believe. And it's not that these men are talking about that, but the track's name's actually called Bars Into Caption, so I thought that was kind of interesting. But the sample on that is an Outkast sample, Too Fresh and Too Clean. So that's an interesting one. I like the way they flipped it. At first I was like, are you just playing the exact beat of it? But they did flip it ever so slightly, you know what I mean? It added a layer of drum pattern on the top of it. And it's cool. Probably not one of my favourites, but in terms of just as a sonic experience, and obviously hearing that sample, is pleasing on the ears, to tell the truth. So Bars Into Caption as well is another one. And the fact they have a song called Tony Starks, I thought they was going to do a bit more with that. Because then I was like, oh, okay, maybe you man have actually really done your research, because the album's called Only Built for Infinity Links. Tony Stark, that's obviously Iron Man, Ghostface, Iron Man, Tony Starks. You know what I mean? I would have thought they would have played into that a little bit more, but fair enough, they didn't. But yo, Only Built for Infinity Links, come back for another one, come back for reviews, come back for content, all of the good stuff. Vibe by Water TV, and we out.